The city was a living machine beneath Elijah Ward's penthouse. From 64 floors up, the traffic below looked like arteries pulsing under frosted skin. The glass walls that wrapped around the room offered a pristine, uninterrupted view clear, cold and utterly sterile. It was the kind of office that screamed success to outsiders. To Elijah, it just echoed back everything he'd learned to suppress. He stood alone at the edge of the window, his tailored navy suit sharp against the pale morning sky. The boardroom behind him was silent, save for the soft hum of HVAC and the rhythmic tapping of a digital clock. 8 in 2 hours, Connor Glass and his team would arrive with contracts. A $10 million acquisition, a legacy deal, the kind that was supposed to cement a man's place in the pantheon of visionaries. And yet, Elijah couldn't breathe. He wasn't nervous. This wasn't nerves. It was something colder. He had felt it before at Harvard, when professors praised his surprising eloquence. In meetings where executives asked if he could urbanize the pitch to make it resonate, at the awards dinners where he was the only black face at the table and somehow always seated near the kitchen. He had worked for years to prove he was different, above it, beyond it. He'd learned the language, buried his accent, wore suits sharper than anyone in the room. He'd built his empire clean and by the book. Never loud, never angry, always accommodating. Still, they never saw him. Not really. Not past the numbers and the press quotes. Maybe this is what winning feels like, he thought, his hand grazing the sleek, untouched contract folder on the table. Lonely, sterile, quiet. He turned from the window. The boardroom was a monument to minimalist power glass, steel, white leather. Nothing personal. No photos, no plaques. Just a sculpted bonsai tree in the corner gifted by a VC who once suggested Elijah drop Ward and use EW. For broader market appeal, Elijah ran a hand down his face and sat heavily at the table. The chair welcomed him like memory. Foam, soft, expensive, unyielding. He remembered his father's hands calloused, proud, brown as Georgia soil. Remembered the sound of his mother's hum while braiding his sister's hair. Those memories didn't fit in here. They stayed in a box, far beneath the polished marble floors. A light knock broke the silence. The evening cleaner must have arrived. Early. Elijah glanced at the clock. It was barely 8:15. He didn't bother looking up. Just waved a hand toward the far end of the room. Then something curious happened. The footsteps didn't retreat. They paused just for a second, then resumed. He turned slightly, catching a glimpse of someone in the reflection of the glass. A young woman, dark skin, braids pulled tight, not moving like someone ashamed to be seen. He blinked, and for the first time in weeks he felt, ... Seen she moved without hurry, a cart of supplies rattling softly behind her. The glass caught her reflection before Elijah did. Braided hair gathered into a thick bun. Dark green jumpsuit crisp despite its labor, and a posture that didn't slouch with apology. Elijah watched, unsure why he hadn't already looked away. Cleaners came and went in this building like clockwork, mostly invisible, always quiet. They entered like shadows and left without a sound. But this one, she stood still. She'd reached the far corner of the boardroom, but paused in front of the floor 2 ceiling windows. Her eyes weren't on the tables or the floors, but on the city. The same view Elijah had stood before moments ago. Her arms folded gently across her chest. She wasn't admiring. She was remembering something, or perhaps claiming something. He felt the shift in the room, not in volume, but in energy, an invisible thread pulled taut between presence and perception. Elijah turned his chair toward her, curious. The silence wasn't awkward. It was deliberate. She knew he was watching. "You see it every day?" she asked, voice low, steady. He blinked. "The view?" She nodded slightly, not turning. "Every time I come here, I stand right here. No matter how many times I clean it, the glass never really stays clean. But the city?" She let the rest hang. Elijah leaned forward. "It's relentless," he offered. Now she turned to him finally. Her face was composed, eyes sharp with something he couldn't name. There was no smile, but no disdain either. Just observation. "I think it forgets people," she said. Unless you own something. He didn't reply. Her words echoed too close. Then, without waiting, she pulled a cloth from her belt and began wiping down the window's edge, methodical. Practiced. She didn't ask him to move. Didn't pretend he wasn't there. Elijah couldn't stop watching her. There was power in her economy of movement, in how she refused to shrink. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lena," she replied, not looking. "Up you." He was momentarily disarmed. People didn't ask. Not here. Elijah. A beat passed. She looked up. "I know." Then she turned back to the glass, and the moment passed, but not entirely. Something stayed, unspoken. Suspended between them like the dust caught in morning light, Elijah sat back in his chair. Suddenly, aware of how sterile the room felt, outside. The city glowed gold with the rise of day, and Lena, without needing permission, kept cleaning. Elijah adjusted his cuffs, each movement deliberate as the elevator doors opened.
Out.
The conference floor was already humming. Assistants in pastel suits whispered near screens. Laptops blinked. Coffee steamed in 2 white mugs. Connor Glass stood at the head of the boardroom, his arms wide with practiced warmth. Eli, the man of the hour. Elijah hated that nickname. He never corrected it, not once. Connor's handshake was firm and theatrical, his smile perfectly measured. Elijah returned it, just as he'd been taught in those early investor meetings. Make them comfortable. Never shrink. Never flare. Always contain. Marla, the VP of HR, chimed in next. "We're so excited about this new chapter. You've built something extraordinary. Truly, it's about time we help bring it to scale." The phrasing struck him. Helped bring it to scale. As if his success needed their validation to become legitimate. They sat. The room grew colder under the illusion of air-conditioned collaboration. Across the table, faces nodded in agreement before anyone spoke. Slides clicked forward. Phrases filled the air. Brand harmony, cultural synergy, post-racial marketability. Elijah's ears rang. Flashbacks flickered, being told in college he was articulate, as if it were rare. The investor who'd called his product surprisingly polished for a non-traditional founder. The black intern once placed on his team for optics during a press tour, and then now, Connor. We've also brought in a marketing group to reimagine the brand voice. Make it a little more... universal. Elijah's gaze snapped up. Universal? Connor smiled like a man pitching a golf club. Yeah, just a soft shift, less edge. We want it to feel aspirational but safe, relatable. Marla added, think less protest roots, more empowerment journey. Hope over history, you know? He clenched his jaw. History apparently was an inconvenience. From where he sat, Elijah could see a faint streak on the glassa. Smear of cleaner mist during the morning's wipe. Lena's hand had been there. Grounded. Real. Not rebranded. You're asking me to erase where it came from, said evenly. Connor leaned in, voice dipped just enough to signal fake intimacy. We're asking you to transcend it. It's not erasure. It's evolution. Elijah gave a polite nod, his hands folded tightly beneath the table. He'd heard this before, different accents and ties. Evolution was always the euphemism.
Always.
The ask to leave parts of himself behind. And yet he smiled, practiced, controlled. The one that fit neatly into their spreadsheets. Of course, he said. Let's keep moving. The slide advanced. More numbers. More smiles with teeth. But inside, slow friction had begun to turn. And in the quiet between voices, Elijah remembered the young woman who didn't bow, who looked out at this same city and said nothing, but saw everything. The contract lay open before him, its pages spread like an autopsy, sterile, lifeless, dissected by corporate language. Elijah Ward sat at the head of the table, pen in hand, poised to surrender what remained of his creation. Connor stood by, the far window, beaming into a phone call with a potential investor.
How?
Marla was scanning the document again, highlighting clauses he already knew by heart. The room buzzed with premature victory, champagne in the fridge already sweating with anticipation. Elijah? stared at the signature line. His name was typed there in bold. Elijah D. Ward. Neat. Final. It looked like someone else's name. Then came the sound barely audible over the murmurs and fluorescent hum, soft wheels, a slow gait. The distant rattle of a cleaning cart. Lena. She passed by the glass corridor. Just outside the room, a reflection mirrored in the boardroom walls like a ghost in daylight. He hadn't expected to see her again, not here, not now. But there she was. She paused, turned then. She did the unthinkable. She stepped inside. Connor's head turned slightly. Marla raised an eyebrow but said nothing, too caught off guard. Elijah looked up as Lena approached, not meekly, but without ceremony. She didn't smile, didn't flinch. She leaned in, just close enough for only him to hear. "They still don't see you," she whispered. Her breath warm, her tone steady. "You're giving away your voice for a seat at their table." Then she straightened and walked away, disappearing as quickly as she came. The pen slipped from his fingers. Time fractured. The walls blurred. The room blurred. Suddenly, he wasn't in a boardroom. He was on a front porch in Georgia, 7 years old, knees scabbed, listening to his grandmother sing while she shelled peas in a rocking chair, her voice worn and honeyed. "Don't let M carve you down, Eli. God made you tall for a reason." Remembered her hands, dark, knotted from labor, still gentle on his cheek. He remembered the eviction of the police, the way they grabbed her Bible and threw it in the dirt like it meant nothing. How she clutched her chest and fell right there in the yard while neighbors watched behind curtains. He hadn't cried then. Not even at the funeral. He had told himself survival meant never showing pain. But now, in this cold tower of success, the tears brimmed without permission. Connor's voice cut back in. "Everything all right, Elijah?" He blinked rapidly, forcing himself back into the moment. "I just need a minute." Marla stood. "Can step out. Give you some space." He nodded. They exited politely, offering reassurances. Alone again. Elijah picked up the pen with trembling fingers. But it no longer felt like an instrument of power. It felt like a scalpel meant to cut something away. He stared at the line, at his name, then, slowly, he set the pen down. And for the first time in years, he breathed. Elijah didn't walk, he left. With intention, with weight. Every step from the boardroom echoed like something final. Connor called after him, voice strained with confusion, wrapped in control. "Elijah? What's going on?" He didn't answer. "Not yet." The hallway pulsed with white light. The minimalist art on the walls looked absurd, now shapes pretending to mean something. Elijah turned into his private office, shut the glass door, and exhaled. It still smelled like cedar polish and glass cleaner, a shrine to silence, to polished restraint. To everything he'd allowed, he stood facing the city for a moment, trying to ground himself in the skyline. But all he saw was a mirror, his reflection in the glass. A man tailored to fit into a place that never wanted his whole self. Connor entered without knocking. "Elijah, listen, whatever this is, let's just sit down and talk through it. You're not yourself today." That was it. The phrase, "not yourself." The same thing they always said when he didn't nod, when he didn't comply, when he finally showed anything real. "I am exactly myself today," Elijah said, voice low, tight. Connor blinked. "We've worked together for years." He backed you when no one else did. "No," Elijah said. "You backed the part of me that made you feel progressive. You backed the black excellence story that made you feel generous. You backed the press releases." Connor stepped closer. "That's not fair." "You know what's not fair?" Elijah snapped. "That I had to smile through investors asking if I used to play ball because I'm tall and black. That your PR team had me pose with underprivileged black kids like I was their savior. That I couldn't ever talk about where I really came from without making someone in the room shift in their seat." Connor raised his hands. "Okay, if something happened this morning, if someone offended you, it wasn't this morning." Elijah's voice cracked, rage and heartbreak folded into one. "It's all of it. Every time I swallowed a joke. Every time I made myself smaller to fit in your rooms. Every damn time I traded my truth for your comfort." The room fell into stunned silence. Outside, Lena's cleaning cart rolled slowly down the hallway. Elijah saw her in the corner of his eye, calm, graceful, still holding her ground even as two suited building managers walked beside her, one holding a clipboard. He knew. He knew before they even opened their mouths. She was being let go. For breaking decorum? For stepping where she wasn't supposed to. For speaking, Connor followed his gaze. We didn't fire her. The building has protocols. Security's in charge of. Save it, Elijah said coldly. You didn't have to swing the axe. You just let the machine do it for you. Lena met his eyes briefly as she walked past. No fear, no apology. Only truth, and Elijah, no longer watching from behind glass, followed her. The hallway smelled like fried plantains and incense. Paint peeled along the edges of the door frames, and the carpet held the weight of years. Elijah stood outside apartment 3C, adjusting his collar for the fourth time. The knock he gave was gentle, but it echoed through the tight corridor like an intrusion. Lena opened the door with the same calm she carried in the boardroom. She didn't smile, but she stepped aside. You came, she said. Not a question. Inside. The apartment was small, but overflowing with life. Walls painted warm ochre. Family photos crowded the shelves, snapshots of birthdays, beach days, graduations. A table by the window was covered with candles, their flickering flames guarding a framed portrait of a young man in a school uniform. His smile was wide, full, of promise. That's my brother, Lena said quietly, catching Elijah's gaze. Mason. He nodded but said nothing. From the kitchen, a woman emerged wearing a floral apron and an expression that didn't welcome strangers. Her eyes scanned Elijah head to toe. You the man who got my daughter fired? She asked flatly. Lena interjected. Mama, please. Her mother clicked her tongue, then disappeared back into the kitchen with a muttered, I'm just saying. Elijah sat down carefully on the edge of the couch. It dipped beneath him, familiar with weight. Lena brought him to ginger, strong, unsweetened. I know I surprised you. That day, she said, settling into the armchair across from him. You? Didn't, he said. You reminded me. She tilted her head. Of what? Who I was before I wanted to be who they'd accept. The candles flickered beside Mason's photo. Elijah looked at it again. What happened to him? He asked Lena. Exhaled slowly. He was stopped walking home. No weapon. No record. It's just a hoodie and the wrong skin at the wrong time. Elijah felt the weight behind every word. They said he matched a description. Said he resisted. The autopsy said otherwise. Her voice didn't tremble. It had trembled once, long ago, and hardened since. What happened afterward? They tried to scrub his name, said the footage was inconclusive. Our protest got attention, then the city paid us to settle and heal quietly. Mason became a whisper. And she paused, looking him in the eye. I cleaned offices. For the same people who helped bury his story? People who didn't even look at me. Elijah swallowed, shame rising in his chest knot. Guilt, but recognition. They had both swallowed too much for too long. Why did you speak to me that day? He asked. Because you were about to disappear too. Not literally, but the part of you that matters. The part that remembers. A long silence settled between them, not awkward, sacred. In the kitchen, her mother hummed something slow, soft. A Haitian lullaby. Elijah looked around. The apartment was small, but it held more truth than his entire office tower. Lena, he said quietly, what if we stop cleaning what they leave behind and start building something they can't ignore? Eyes narrowed slightly, curious. Then, say it loud. Elijah Ward stepped back into the tower as the sun cracked over the city's soft orange, bleeding across skyscrapers. This time, his gait was different. No tension in his jaw, no second-guessing in his stride. He wasn't here to comply. He was here to reclaim. The elevator doors opened to the 64th floor. Connor and Marla were already in the boardroom, suits crisp, smiles thin with anticipation. But when they saw Elijah, something in his expression made their posture falter. Elijah, Connor began. We have the final drafts. I won't be signing anything, Elijah said, voice even. A beat of stunned silence. Marla blinked. I'm sorry, what? He stepped forward and placed the contract on the table, still bound in its pristine leather folder. I built this company with intention. From nothing. And I'm not handing it over to people who think diversity is a brand strategy. Connor's jaw tightened. This is emotional, no, Elijah cut in. This is clarity. He turned toward the tinted glass wall where the city yawned below them. Effective immediately, I'm pulling out of this deal. I'll be launching a fund seed capital for black and brown founders. People who've been overlooked, minimized, and erased. No more gatekeeping. No more filtering truth to fit your metrics. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a metal lighter. Elijah, be reasonable. But he'd already lit the edge of the contract. Flames licked the paper, curling names and clauses into ash. The fire was small, controlled, cleansing. Connor backed away. This is symbolic nonsense, exactly, Elijah said. A new symbol. Later that week, in a modest co-working space downtown, Elijah held a small press conference. No stage, no podium, just a circle of chairs, faces from the neighborhood. Young founders, old mentors, and beside him Lena Tucson. He gestured toward her. This is Lena. She's not a diversity hire or a headline. She's our new director of community equity because she sees what others miss. Lena stood, calm and commanding. We're not cleaning up after silence anymore. We're building something that speaks. Applause rippled across the room, quiet at first, then rising. Outside, the skyline remained unchanged, but inside, something had undeniably begun.